Just by way of introduction here on the stage for those who care to listen and watch, news people, both on the business side and hacks like me, Money Control, clearly they dominate the digital business news space, and not for now but for well over 2 decades. That's Nalin. Sanjay, of course, Indian Express, one of the best names in investigative journalism, carrying forward that legacy into the digital era, and Ashok, who's been one of India's finest legal reporters, legal minds, legal editors, and now works in a very interesting profile. And Business Today, one of the fastest growing multi-platform business companies, business news companies in India. I represent that, Siddharth Zarabi. So what I want to do is to go to you first, Sanjay, and ask you that question in your capacity, that while we talk about digital news and the future of that and how it's evolved over time, one of the key issues really is ownership. We've all grown up in a media ecosystem where from origin to end, including customer acquisition, was in the hands of the publisher, of the company. But in the digital era, there are just a few handful of companies which own the entire distribution. They own the customer, so to say, and they have the algorithm which is completely opaque to most publishers. In this era that we are operating, is there a fundamental danger to the very existence of news and digital news in the way that most of us understand?
I think this is a question I think anybody in the digital news era kind of, sleeps with and wakes up every morning asking, what's happening and how do you kind of ensure that you have a sustainable business 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line. And you're absolutely right. If you go back to the print or the broadcast era, basically having capital was very important because you had to build acquisition, content, distribution, all of it. And then when digital happened, somewhere we had new entrants who took on the role of distribution. So whether you look at search or social, they became distributors, and before they became distributors and had that cloud, they actually leveraged the digital news media because they were the large ones with a massive reach. I'm talking about early 2000 when internet was just kind of taking shape. They rode on these news platforms to create their reach. Then they created a referral model where the, a LinkedIn or a Facebook would extract your contact book and, create a network. But there was I will not say a fair trade, but there was a trade where, they sent traffic. I was able to monetize that traffic and I was giving content to them, which kept their users engaged. I think that trade is now going to break down, especially with the advent of AI. And I was just telling Nalin before, we came to the stage that I don't go to search anymore. I don't go to social anymore. My needs for content are very specific. I have multiple AI tools on my phone. I normally query them and get the answers I want. Now that's the world we are heading towards, which means even a newspaper site will have, or a news site will have a challenge in attracting people to its own platform. Now, if I'm producing content and I'm not able to get readers, and that means I'm not able to monetize, then why will I produce content? And if original content is not being produced, then where will the generative AI engines get the content to keep themselves updated? So I think we are in a catch-22 situation. It's going to be a little paradoxical right now, and we'll have to see how it evolves. Because ultimately, generative AI engines will need content which is credible, which is fresh, which is updated, which brings a new perspective for them to give answers to people like us who've started using these tools. But right now, the model is broken, and I think over the next 3-4 years, it'll probably evolve. And in the meantime, you have to figure out what is the definition of news.
Very, very important point, Sanjay, that you made, and basically over the last 3 decades, you sketched how it happened. I remember the first digital stories that got published. I was in a newsroom where you wrote originally for the paper, and then The biggest struggle in the newsroom from all print journalists then was, you should keep my story for page 1 tomorrow and not put it on digital at that time. Nalin, you've also been there, done all of that. I want you to take forward the original question, but with a tweak. The point that Sanjay made, that AI engines are more specific, more tailor-made, and quicker in helping me search. And that seems to now be the biggest challenge for the digital news ecosystem. Do you agree? What would you add to that?
No, I totally agree with Sanjay, but I want to add a couple of things. See, and before I come to the AI part of it, see, the digital model, when ultimately who pays for news? Is the advertiser who pays for news. Either they're public broadcasters, which the taxpayer is paying for, or they're private players, where ultimately you either do it out of philanthropy or you do it out of India has a long lineage of media being nationalist and so on in the earlier time, and otherwise it's commercial, right? Now the issue is this, that when the entire media has moved to digital, that entire money on news has not moved from the legacy platforms to digital. News is just a very small part of that. So I think there's something which Sanjay said about what is news, right? So that there was an older type of editor that we all grew up with, an older type of journalism that we all grew up with, is very traditional, where you decided what it was, and you decided what the masses and the hoi polloi should consume. Now what digital is telling us is that, well, nobody cares, right? So there is a much wider audience out there.
Can I pause you there, because Nalin is saying nobody cares about news. Just a show of hands, you know, the few people that are here, do any of you care about news? Do you consume news? Just a show of hands.
So,
okay.
So I'm very glad that so many people raise their hands, because, see, look, I was trying to be a bit flippant, but look, when I say nobody cares, what I mean to say is that around, if you look at the wider universe of this market that we operate in, what news means to each person in this room is very different. It's not the same definition. And that definition is often at odds with what earlier editors of yore were thinking about. So, to cut a long story short, the big challenge for newsrooms now is that in the absence of a viable digital model of, which is see, what did people think? People thought advertising will happen, and the same model that worked in TV and print, and TV is now breaking down essentially. Print is declining significantly. That will happen on digital, the same kind of thing. That's not happening. And then you mentioned the algorithms and so on. So for Moneycontrol, for example, we are moving to entirely different forms of a business model where we now have 1 million paying subscribers. So you will have to find people. See, in the old days, people came to you for appointment viewing, the 9 p.m. show, the front page of the newspaper, right? So journalists didn't really have to find their consumers. Now you have to find your consumer, and that puts a totally different thing to it, right? So when we are saying million paying, the challenge for general newsrooms is the way news is produced, or in traditional newsrooms, it is not produced in a way that will be consumed well. Right? You almost have to break it down and build a new structure apart. When we went to 1 million paying subscribers, we did it by adding many things around news, which were actually useful to people beyond just perspective or opinion, or you know, it has to be really original. It has to add a lot of value to it.
Ashok, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Sanjay and Nalin have just said. And as far as digital news is concerned, now, both Sanjay and Nalin have spoken from a very domestic perspective, but I represent RT, which is an international, which is a global channel, and we have faced a set of difficulties as far as digital news is concerned. Because if you look at the beast, the digital news, it's controlled by big technology companies, whether it's Google, whether it's Meta, or whether it's X. Now, these are the few companies who were originally not in the news business, but they were in the technology business and made that leap from technology to news and started monetizing and influencing and dictating the narratives. That's fine. Technology came to the aid of news. The news also used technology to reach out to more number of people. That's fine. But the problem started when these big technological companies started using their power as a political weapon. RT has been at the receiving end. Ever since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, we have been sanctioned by major platforms. You know, all these platforms talk, big technology companies talk about freedom of speech. But what does this sanction mean? Does it mean you are going to curb the freedom of speech? Somebody who gives a different narrative? No, it doesn't mean that. But now coming to the main topic of digital news, the biggest challenge as far as digital news is concerned is that today there is, I believe, an overload of information on digital platforms. And when I say there is an overload of information, the problem here is, as a content user, I really do not know as to which content is credible, which content is accurate, and which content is
Right.
something that I can believe.
Good point there, and let's take this forward. I also want the audience here to cooperate once more. If you consume news, and many of you raised your hands, I'll ask you two questions. Do you consume your news on digital platforms that are owned by companies like Network 18, Money Control, or Indian Express, or do you consume it from Facebook, Google? Can people just raise their hands for that? Okay. Yeah. And there was just one person saying both. Do you prefer to go directly to the website of your most favorite media company? Okay. So we didn't get a very clear, sharp decision, but Sanjay, I want to come to you again. And taking forward the point that Nalin made about a subscription-led sort of focus that they have, and he also made this point that as we evolved into digital, the earlier revenue model didn't walk along with it. We walked ahead, but that didn't walk ahead. So therefore, is paywall journalism relevant in the Indian context, given how our market is divided? I don't like saying this, so don't get me wrong. There's a bottom of barrel market, there's a mid market, and then there is a premium market. So is it the way forward?
I think there's no choice, first of all, because you need to, the way the media model today is structured, you need to have multiple revenue streams. One revenue stream, especially advertising, will not work because the ad rates are now determined through an auction mechanism. Right? That sets the benchmark. So I may say, okay, I'm premium, I have a filtered audience, but my benchmark is still what a person is going to get at the auction. So, I may charge a premium on that auction price. I don't determine my pricing. The platforms which set the benchmark on auctioning do not produce their own content, right? They get that content for free. So that's where the problem starts. Now, in that scenario, therefore, media organizations need to have multiple revenue streams to break even and be profitable. I think the other challenge is that when you go back to a print organization, let's say, a Times of India or Indian Express, they didn't have 50 million or 100 million or 200 million reach. They were profitable entities with 1 million, 2 million kind of distribution. Now, if you look at India, the economic model, and I was looking at Nandan Nilekani's recent presentation, he's saying there's 1% of Indians, who earn above 53 lakhs per annum, right? Now, and then there's another, I think 10% who earn more than 13 lakhs. So if you're talking from an advertising perspective and you can filter out and control a small segment of a relevant market, I think the model will become attractive again.
As I understand, you seem to be hinting at the role and responsibility of publishers who are represented here on the stage, for example, to address that market. Does it therefore mean that I repeat that phrase, I don't like it myself, bottom of barrel market will be addressed by these third party, non-credible, forward-based journalism? Because there is no money there in that segment?
No, I don't mean that. And I'll give you an example. For instance, Indian Express is now partly behind paywall. It's not fully behind paywall, right? On a daily basis, I upload about 300 stories, and not more than 10 stories are paywalled, from an access point of view. But if I make enough money on Indian Express, my Jansatta, my Loksatta, my Tamil, Malayalam, Bangla editions will continue to be free. So there's an internal subsidization that will be at play. At the end of the day, advertising is both a relevance and a reach play. There will be certain campaigns which will want reach, right? There'll be certain campaigns which will
Which
want
want-
relevance. If I go to a Maruti, my Indian Express premium audience is something where I'll be able to charge a premium and say, look, you won't get them to too many other places in the news ecosystem, because a typical person will subscribe to maybe 3 to 4 news websites. He'll not subscribe to 20 unless he's a news junkie. So I think we'll get back to an era that existed with when in print, a household would typically get one newspaper and you had a monopoly. So I don't think we'll return to a monopoly scenario, but you will have 3 or 4 subscriptions, and then if you are one of those, you will be able to start charging a premium for your audiences. So you're charging your customer, which is what the newspaper also did. And because of that charge, you now have a filter for economic criteria of the reader.
Right.
And therefore, you will be able to charge a higher premium on your advertising. So I think that's how the model will play out.
Please jump in. Ashok, you wanted to come in and then to Nalin.
So I do believe that there is a revenue challenge as far as the digital news is concerned. And I think the subscription model serves the purpose, because I believe what was really happening till now was that if Indian Express or Money Control put out their content on the worldwide site, it got picked up by Google, and then it was fairly distributed. So they never got a chance to monetize the content they had created. Now putting it behind a paywall gives them that opportunity, and also use the technology in a fair manner where they, what do we say, tantalize the reader to say that this is the story, you can possibly access it, pay so much, and so on and so forth. That's the revenue model. But another interesting thing, or rather, as I always believe as far as digital news is concerned, is that the biggest problem is that when we talk of a household, earlier we had a scenario where every family got just one newspaper and everybody was exposed to one kind of a narrative. But everything has changed today. So if today we talk of a scenario of a household of 4 people, a husband, wife and 2 children, all of them are consuming their news from different sources. Somebody is going to the newspaper, somebody is going to Google, somebody is going to Indian Express, somebody is going to Money Control. Now everybody, what really happened was that not only it democratized the spread of news or the digital platform, but it also gave you an option. But again, I'm emphasizing, the biggest challenge for digital news is credibility and accuracy, because there are so many players.
Nalin, yeah, go ahead.
So I want to add to this. See, I want to pick up from what the lady there said. She said she reads Money Control because of which she trusts it, right? So I want to thank you for that. But I want to make a fundamental point picking up from that. See, I don't think we should give the impression, in my view, it is not all gloom and doom. In my view, we are seeing huge opportunity. Because the doom and gloom is with the old publishers who just don't know how to deal with the new world. But actually, you see the immense possibility now. For example, the news doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a society, and it fulfills the needs of the society, right? For example, in this country, there are roughly around 190 demat accounts at the moment, roughly at the last count. That demat revolution is happening, and the investment culture is changing largely in tier 2, tier 3 towns, and now in rural India as well, not just out of the main cities that it used to be earlier. You look at a platform like Money Control. Our platform now has about 100 million users a month and 1 million paying subscribers. Why are we getting that subscribers? There is a core investor subscriber who is looking at Money Control to find data to make more informed investment decisions, right? Now, the definition of news there is very different for that reader than as opposed to a reader from Indian Express. Now, what Money Control is doing, and I'm not saying this because I represent Money Control, is that it is reducing the arbitrage on information. The kind of information that investment advisors would have or big investment banks would have, you are getting at fraction of price to an individual retail user. And the idea is to make more informed decisions. That's one kind of market. But we also have another market where people are trying to figure out what to do and they don't know, they're not very deep into this, right? For that you have to play the other audience game. But eventually that person converts into a paying subscriber. The other point I want to make is on AI. See, what it means for newsrooms like ours and for all our newsrooms is, a lot of news is pro forma. A lot of news is pre-planned. 70-80% of what happens in the world is you know what's happening, right? It's 20% that surprises you, and that's the big thing. AI can automate a lot of that. What journalists will have to do, a lot of stuff will get automated by AI. Journalists will have to upskill and do some much more high-end stuff. Like a panel like this, you don't need a journalist to cover a panel like this. AI can write 10 reports on what we are talking. But AI can't get you, 5 of us on this stage. It can't write perspective. It can't get an interview with you or whatever. So what I'm saying is you can bifurcate a lot of tasks earlier and use things intelligently.
I want to do another audience poll. Does anyone know the name of the most expensive subscription-driven media company or media service in the world? Okay, that's one guess. People on the panel know this, but anyone else who wants to take a guess? Okay. It's not. It is Bloomberg News. A terminal there costs you $2,500 plus taxes per month. But that's why I brought this up, was that perhaps, and just to add a comment on what my co-panelists have said, if the information is of use, if there is value attached to it, then there is a certain clientele, if I may use that word, that will be willing to pay for it. But obviously, it can't be at that price levels. It has to be more mass market oriented. Let's look at India, and Sanjay, I'm coming back to you. We are not a one language market. In earlier iterations, I have worked with companies that have only forever worked only with one language, which is the English language. They find it very difficult to customize to India. I remember the example of one of the most popular soft drinks in the world, and when they came to India for years, they struggled with increasing adoption, and they didn't know. And then they commissioned a survey, and that survey threw up a very, very simple fundamental point, which is Indians and their threshold and their tolerance for the sugariness of the soft drink is at a much higher threshold, and therefore they ended up making their cola far more sweeter than what you get outside. This has happened to tractor companies, it has happened to car companies, it has happened to pretty much every foreign company's overseas company in India. Unless you Indianize, you don't succeed. Sanjay, in terms of the growth, we are speaking in English, everything here is in English, but English is a very, very small, very finite kind of market, and I don't think it's growing. So two parts to my question. What really is the growth market within India for digital news, and within the mix of regional languages, if you could just kind of pick your top 5 in terms of growth?
Yeah. So I think English, of course, is not growing, beyond the new additions that we are doing on an organic basis. But other markets are growing, and definitely Hindi is the biggest. So therefore but it's also the most competitive because you have entrenched large players out there. I think it's a population-based place. So, Bangla, Tamil, Malayalam, Marathi, these are the big ones. And we have presence in all of these languages, and we are seeing very rapid growth, especially in the southern states. In Marathi, because we were very well entrenched with the print brand, so we are not seeing the growth because our penetration was pretty high. But Tamil, Malayalam and Bangla, we are seeing very good growth, and we launched Gujarati about 2 years back. That's also now getting a lot of traction. So I think the regional continues to grow, and I think there are multiple factors to it. One is, the adoption is happening, people want more local content, and as more senior people come into the fray, they prefer native languages. Young people are more into, English, Hindi, and more diverse kind of this thing. Second is, I think what is also happening, and the volume of search, I believe, is going down. While we talk about data, we say, okay, Google has lost 10% market share in search. I think the search market itself has gone down, and we haven't talked about it. Nobody's talking about that.
And is this search market shifting to AI?
No. So what is happening
search?
is AI is impacting the search market in English, because that's where the entire AI play is happening today. So what is happening is regional search is growing, and therefore we are seeing a lot of organic growth on the regional sites. That's my belief. I don't have data to support it, but I think that's what is happening, and that will continue to happen, because people like us who are more adept at using AI tools, generative AI tools, probably stop going to search, and the traditional people continue to do more search, more discover, and therefore the regional sites continue to get more traffic. So I think so the regional will continue to grow, but regional monetization challenge is even bigger than English because the benchmark rates there are even smaller, the demand is lesser, and again you have a very tough competition with video vis-a-vis static display on the advertising front because interactive ads in a video format on video content do much better in native languages than static display ads. So I think the big shift, and this is a prediction I can make here today, I think in 25 years reading and writing will become a skill which will be difficult to find because there will be no need for it.
That's a great point. 25 years. Ashok, you agree with that? And I also want you to, and this is in your role as a lifelong journalist, that this impression that people have that young people do not consume news at all. They're happy watching reels and living in communities online. So they participate in communities which are pretty much open 24/7.
So first thing, as Sanjay said, rightly said, I do entirely agree with him that maybe in 25 years, maybe even less, that reading and writing would actually be a very rare skill. Now coming to your question about young people, whether they are consuming news or whether they are not. Now this is a question that should be of concern to all the news managers because globally, because this young generation which is coming up are the ones, they are the consumers. They are the end consumers of news. Now from my little experience that I have had previously with teaching law, and I had the opportunity to interact with a lot of young students, university students, and I was really surprised. I was also under the impression that the young people, especially the college and university students, are not interested in news and they are more interested in watching reels on Instagram or maybe any other time pass activity. But at the end of the day, I realized that they do spend approximately 20 minutes of their time that they are online looking for news, trying to catch up with what's happening globally, what's happening in India. Now, that number, that figure of 20 minutes is not very encouraging because I don't believe that if you spend just if you are spending 6 hours scrolling for frivolous material on Instagram, shopping, etc., and spending only 20 minutes on news, I believe that the way we deliver news on our digital platforms has to change if we have to increase our rate of engagement with the young people.
Okay. Nalin, you wanted to...
So, I don't think it's correct that young people don't consume news. I spend a lot of time with young people and I used to teach at a university before this. And look, I think young people consume news, they don't consume brands. So there's a big difference between news brands and news. Young people don't give a damn about news brands, right? So, and they're looking at, in fact, a lot of young people are deeply informed about, so, it's more information and they look at the value of that information specifically. They don't care where it's coming from. And it may be from an individual, that's much more valuable to them than if it's coming from a Times of India or an Aaj Tak or whatever, if that is fulfilling their purpose more. And if you ask
that's a very good point. I'm interrupting you so that the audience understands what you are saying. You would rather go to some, and there are some young people, I'm going to point towards them, they'll probably believe someone sitting in Germany or Spain about some massive political development rather than a group that's been around doing the same thing for 150 years.
So the point I'm trying to make is, look, you can see it half full or glass half empty, right? It's not like a lot of media is also doing great stuff. Like half the stuff that is on news is useless. And you look at the echo chambers that many people
No,
run,
but
right?
Nalin, you and I both deal with these finfluencers, as I call them.
Absolutely.
So,
which is why SEBI's cracked down on it.
And you and I are under strict sort of codes and ethics that we have to follow. वहाँ तो कुछ नहीं है, वहाँ कुछ भी बोल सकते हैं आप social media पे.
People today, this is the first generation, which is a mobile phone, which was born when the mobile phone was already of age, right?
I'll just give one data point while we're talking about this. So we have subscriptions. We've had it for the last 4 years now. And 40% of our subscribers are less than 30 years of age. 40%.
See, the other point, in tandem with that, I think what we are also seeing is a huge erosion in television audiences. Most people I know have not seen television for the last 2-3 years. I know very few people who actually watch television. They consume it on YouTube, they consume it on other forms of media. But by television, I mean having a cable channel in their house and watching it like that. So, and I think a lot of channels are now adapting to that reality.
I think the reality is that instead of one large screen, everyone has a screen in their hand.
Whenever there is a news happening, every news outlet is interpreting that news in their own manner. They're giving a perception, they're giving a narrative. So we could have a Pahalgam story happening, but there could be 400 news outlets which would give a different take on the same story. Now, the problem that you rightly pointed out is that who do I believe? Who do I trust for news? Now, that's where usually the legacy media has taken the lead because they have established themselves as newspapers, and probably that sense of trustworthiness comes with them. But now even they are facing problem because they are like a little slow, or most of the time we see that there are individual social media handles which are breaking the news first. So, but at the same time, you're right when you say we don't know whether this is fake news, this is propaganda or disinformation. Now, this is something that all news outlets across the world are fighting to address.
We have a process, and that process is the author checker kind of a process, which we call the edit team, the editors, sub-editors. So it's not like the reporter is filing the story and it's going live. And this is what we see with the creator economy, that there is no checking process out there. Plus, we encourage multiple viewpoints to get supported, and we actively pursue that as a means of bringing different perspectives to our readers. So it's not that, you will be aligned to one particular viewpoint and present that, because then we are no different from an echo chamber kind of a presentation. So as a media organization, our editorial team, our board works to, one, cross-check whatever is being published. So it's cross-check, double-check before it's published, and that's why we are perhaps slow.
Very good point Sanjay makes.
And in fact,
take your
adding
seat,
to
yeah.
what Sanjay is saying, there's always a process of attribution. Who is the news being attributed to?
And Nalin, isn't there a larger point? Come in on this. When I started in a newsroom, my editor used to tell me, you have to get it right every single story. And just as an example, that if a company has made 40% quarter-on-quarter increase in profits, 40 cannot become 4.0. 40 cannot become 4%. So 40% has to be 40%. Otherwise, we'll get hit by a lawsuit. We were never told, and neither do I tell my colleagues even in the digital newsroom, that they have to chase clickbaits. But at the corporate level, at the revenue level, at the reach and engagement level, you are living in a clickbait reality in digital journalism. How do you reconcile that?
So I think that's a mistake a lot of newsrooms have made. In our experience, clickbait journalism is always counterproductive. It does not work. It gives you a short-term thing, but eventually you lose the audience. The reason why Moneycontrol has grown from 40 million to 100 million users a month in 16 months is fundamentally because we are very particular about all these checks and balances that Sanjay just pointed out. Because clickbait journalism, in my view, is cheating the user.
Okay, clickbait is cheating.
I just wanted to share a small anecdote as far as accuracy of news is concerned. And as you rightly pointed out, 40% cannot become 4.0%. Now, there was a very interesting case that was being played out in the Supreme Court of India, and I'll tell you how accuracy impacts news. Is that it's a very high-profile corporate case, and one gentleman of one particular news outlet reports the story. So, just to give you what the story was reported, but before that I'll give you a background, that when there were arguments happening in the Supreme Court, one senior lawyer arguing on behalf of that corporate company told the Supreme Court that, you see, tax avoidance is permissible in law. However, when the arguments got over, what got reported was tax evasion is permissible in law. And trust me, for 3 hours, the stocks of the company fell down. And there, a lot of things happened after that. But yes,
Avoidance versus evasion, and see
evasion.
the impact. Yes, we are India's oldest business magazine, a child of the reforms, but you're actually right in pointing out that our highest growth has happened in the non-print medium over the last 3.5 years. And across the 4 verticals of our business, digital with video embedded in it is one of the fastest growing. On television, I think a very distinct change in consumption is happening. Television, as Nalin and others also have said directly, indirectly, was appointment viewing on one large screen in a room. Very few homes have a television in each room, even today or at its peak. So that has moved to everybody having one screen, a smart screen in their hand. So that has changed. The second is, instead of appointment viewing, it is viewing at your choice. Power has shifted to the consumer. I can always go to the television company's feed on YouTube or on their website. And just one final point, a live stream is something that companies across the world, both original television companies and native companies which have started with a live stream first product, have been working on. The jury, according to me, is still out about its relevance, because I think just as text is subscription driven, subscription video makes sense. The distortion is happening because of free video on social platforms. But I can also offline tell you that wherever value and information that you can act on, that you can gain from, that you can make money from, or that you can leverage in terms of empowering yourself, people are willing to pay for that video. So that's why it's called SWOT. Sanjay, please.
So I think on print, I have a slightly contra view, and I've had that view for 25 years.
Yes.
So, you know, when internet came, people said, oh, newspapers are going to go away in 5 to 7 years. We are in 2025, newspapers are still growing, right? I think it's an industry that has reached maturity. Newspapers are what I call a cash cow business right now. They're not a growth business. I think in India, they will continue to be around for another 10, 15 years, easily. And I'll tell you the reason why. You know, in Indian road, you will find a rickshaw, you will find a Mercedes going together. We are a country where a lot of contradictory stuff happens all the time. So I think we'll have newspapers continue, and there's a reason. A newspaper is a convenient, filtered, disposable, portable means of getting news. And today, when I look at my subscription, and we had 3 products. We had the e-paper, we had a digital, we had a combo. Now the e-paper itself was almost 30-40% of our subscribers. Now that format somehow resonates with readers, and it resonates with the topic here today, information overload. So what does a newspaper do? In 15 minutes, it gives you a sense of fulfillment, which with a digital platform you don't get even after spending 6 hours, and I can guarantee you that.
I had a footnote to what Sanjay just said. You know, the other thing that a newspaper gives you, which I find invaluable, is that it always surprises me. With on my digital feed, the algorithm shows me stuff that it thinks I want to read, and is generally within my echo chamber, right? In a newspaper, whenever I'm flipping the pages, I often stop on a story which I would not otherwise read, or which would not come up in my feed, and then I end up reading it, because, so that's how it does.
Considering, and I'm ending this session now, considering the origin of the word algorithm, and I'm sure you all know the actual history behind it, I think algorithms are super editors. It is a concern that all of us have. So I'm going to thank this entire panel for their time, and you, this audience that's been very involved and very engaged. Thank you very much. It's great that people are still engaging with news. On that optimistic note, once again, thank you very much for being here.